What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at character creation in the Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy beta that has just went live today, and I'm able to bring you this and a couple other videos today thanks to getting access to it a little bit early via Owlcat Games, just so you're aware. But one of the coolest things coming from the alpha version into the beta version is that this time we get a proper look at character creation. But before we dive in fully, I do want to emphasize a beta inherently means not done, and so I'm not going to dig into the weeds of exact numbers and stuff here and there, as they are quite frankly likely to change, but it's also possible they'll add or adjust stuff later on. And so what this is right now is just a look at it as it stands in the beta specifically. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive into it. So first things first, you have the portrait selection. You can pick from a few portraits that are here right now, and then if there's a custom portrait that you have your eye on, you'll also be able to use those. This is obviously not all of them. Something that Owlcat has done previously is bring forward their portraits and stuff from their past game into the new one. And so I would fully expect, honestly, for there to be not only more of these, but likely a rehash of some of the ones from like Rogue Trader that you could then select as an example, so just something to be aware of. Your next choice after that is voice selection. There are only a couple of them right now, 2 for male and female. They've been adjusting how stuff is like voice acted and whatnot, so I don't know exactly what their plans are for this specifically, but I would not be surprised if there were more of these on the way as well, but it will be a choice you can make. Now, your first big selection is actually your archetype and your origin. So the way it works right now is a bit different from Rogue Trader, even if the fundamental underlying system is the same. And that's why Warrior, Officer, Operative, and Soldier are familiar from Rogue Trader if you happen to have played that. Some of their core abilities still work the same way. However, there's been an interesting change here, because the abilities and things you have access to on level up is based basically on your archetype and your origin now. So in addition to these archetypes, you can also pick an origin, of which there are currently 4 at least, which will then give you access to some other stuff, but notably specializations. So if we look at, say, the warrior archetype here, you get some familiar abilities from Rogue Trader like Charge and Endure. Later on, if we look at the progression track, we can pick up some abilities that will again be familiar to us, as well as talents, specializations, and mods. So let's start with specializations. Specializations are basically where you are going to get further talents and stuff from. So our Rogue Trader, when you leveled up, just kind of dumped a million choices onto you, which could be overwhelming for a lot of people. The way Dark Heresy handles it is these specializations. You get the core abilities from your archetype, and then as you level up, starting at I believe it's level 3, you can pick a specialization. The exception to this is Mystic, who does actually pick one at character creation. Everyone else, those specializations. These specializations then give you access to further talents and modifications, as well as some skill modifiers and stuff that you will then be able to pick on your further level ups. So if you, for instance, wanted to specialize in dual wielding or tearing apart enemy armor or heavy or medium armor, that kind of thing, you would pick up that specialization, get some immediate benefit, yes, but then also be able to further pick up like talents and stuff later on that will allow you to pick those during leveling up. So instead of having overwhelming choices here, it's kind of guided by what you choose to specialize in. Otherwise, the archetypes are more or less what you remember from Rogue Trader. Warrior being, of course, melee and upfront in your face. Officer having the ability to give extra turns to other characters, though the reined-in version that we saw in the later parts of Rogue Trader's balancing, let's say, alongside heavily buffing your allies as well. Now, the one thing I want to point out with Officer in particular, outside of the usual stuff, is the demoralization specialist. So demoralization affects the morale of enemies, in particular demoralizing them. So in combat, every character has a morale situation of like -10 to +10. And when enemies get to the bottom of that, -10, they will potentially break and either simply lose their turn or potentially attack other characters, and this is a great way to dominate the battlefield. So having an officer give your character's turn, but also play into reducing the morale of individual enemies via the demoralization specialist can be super helpful. but basically they're all about buffing and giving extra turns to your characters. Then we have the Operative. The Operative is all about cutting through defenses and doing big attacks, typically against a single target. This is given to you by things like Expose Weakness, which gets an extra hit chance while also inflicting exploits on your enemies. Exploit itself giving the target more damage from all sources, so more or less again what we saw in Rogue Trader. Now later on they get access to anti-armor, the ability to take apart armor specifically, as your characters and the enemy will have a separate armor bar based on your equipment in this game, so having somebody being able to tear through more of that and also deal heavy single target damage could be a way to play this. And you can also go the precise target route, which allows you to target individual body parts and do extra damage while you're doing so. You could also pick up again demoralization or combat disruption, basically giving you the ability to break concentration on enemies when they're trying to do things, or specialize in medium armor or even simply movement. Unsurprisingly, a lot of their talents will flow into things like using sniper rifles and basically anything that's all about hitting one specific enemy extraordinarily hard. Then we've got Soldier. This is basically your guns archetype, and it is again more or less what we remember from Rogue Trader in particular. You can specialize in using guns, either single target or the burst fire is back, and there's a couple extra abilities there that give you a little extra movement, or in this case, Revel and Slaughter gives you extra damage to enemies within your influence, which is like a sphere of tiles around your character and wherever you're standing currently. And unsurprisingly, pretty much all of their specializations play directly into that, but also stuff like allowing them to use either medium or heavy armor or have more movement, but they can specialize in burst fire or area of effect or even dual wielding and things like that. But the one people likely want to hear about the most is in fact the Mystic. The Mystic is your sanctioned Psyker archetype. You can also pick this as an origin and have it separate from the Mystic archetypes. You don't have to pick Mystic if you want to be a Psyker, but it is certainly an option. And what this is going to allow you to do is pick up the push ability in particular, which will allow you to tear down the veil of the Immaterium, potentially producing chaotic effects, but also giving you a couple extra special talents and things like that, like the ability to pick up force weapons in particular and do really well, or allowing the veil degradation to be directly affected by that character's morale, and basically just some extra stuff that would allow you to play a sanctioned Psyker even more in depth if you didn't want to mix it with like Warrior or something. Like the melee Psyker was a popular choice in Rogue Trader, for example, and you can still do that. Now, outside of your Psyker specializations, you also get access to medium armor, combat disruption, and demoralization, again, kind of playing into that morale bonus. But like I said, Mystic actually gets to pick their specialization, or at least their first one right at character creation, and this is because they have to pick one of the Psyker disciplines basically to give them their first few abilities, and so you can pick between Pyromancy, Santic, or Telekinesis, which should be familiar again if you've played Rogue Trader. Now, they will still potentially pick up more specializations, even other Psyker disciplines if you want, as they level up just like the others, but they also get to pick their first one right here. Now, the catch to that is if you are playing a Mystic, they have to take the sanctioned Psyker origin. They don't have a choice, because again, that is the sanctioned Psyker archetype. Now, assuming that's not what you're picking, you have your choice between Astra Militarum, Imperial Noble, Sanctioned Psyker, and Criminal. All of these give you an ability, a modifier to your characteristics, as well as some extra modifications. Now, this is where I want to talk about the modifications just because it's easier and I didn't do it earlier. Modifications are essentially little things you can equip to your individual abilities. So you have a lot less abilities in Dark Heresy compared to Rogue Trader because of the way it handles level ups now. However, to bring back some of that depth, a lot of the things that you would have typically picked up as like talents or whatever potentially in Rogue Trader have now been assigned to modifications. These are things that can be assigned to individual abilities from your character page to modify how they work. It's a really interesting system, and I think it's where a lot of the nuance in character building is likely going to come from. But otherwise, every single Origin is more or less a variation of exactly that. You get your ability, you get your characteristic modifiers, potentially skill modifiers, and potentially talents, specializations, etc. So just a little extra on top of whatever you were already choosing to do. Now, the 3 origins that are not the Sanctioned Psyker can also choose a dynasty, basically a little sub-variation of Astra Militarum, the dynasty of the nobles they came from, or the group of criminals they came from, that kind of thing. And each of those options also conveys an extra little benefit as well. So in addition to those base things for each origin, if you're not a Sanctioned Psyker, you can also get some options to customize that origin a little bit farther by changing the exact ability that it has in a way that is hopefully a little more useful to you specifically. Next up, we pick our home world. So right now there are 3 of these. Just like with everything else, I don't know if they are planning to add more of them. And just like previously, we get characteristic modifiers, skill modifiers, modifications, and talents from this choice. Now, the one I want to call your attention to is actually Death World in particular, because Death World gets the extra ability of getting to pick one of 5 types of Death World, which can give you an extra bonus to a specific skill you are interested in, and there's a little variation there. Whereas outside of the usual stuff, each of these choices gives you a little specific bonus as well. Hive World, as you can see, allows your character to gain morale simply while adjacent to allies, or extra movement if they are not. Death World has a significantly reduced chance to suffer critical effects from enemy characters and stuff, and if you resist something successful, you gain morale as well. And then Forge World characters have the ability to gain morale when their armor is high, and they gain movement as that armor stat lowers. And again, that is a secondary health bar in combat in this particular game. And then finally, we have our characteristics. So just like with Rogue Trader, we have all of these characteristics that govern things like our skills and general abilities. For the most part, these are what you would expect. Weapon skill is your melee weapons. Ballistic skill is your ranged weapons. Strength is going to give you extra melee damage while also helping out with athletics and tenacity. Toughness determines your max base health or your wounds. Agility is your ability to evade attacks by adding defense to your total and giving you extra movement points potentially. Also, intelligence affecting a bunch of your lore skills and also affecting your ability to deal vital damage. Perception is your senses, also affecting vital damage and a few skills. Willpower is a big one for Psykers in particular, but also affects a couple skills. A lot of your Psyker abilities in particular will scale off of willpower, though some of them also rope in things like intelligence as well, so you got to look at exactly what the skill is using, just so you're aware. And then Fellowship is your ability to influence people around them, often used in the calculations for stuff like the officer abilities. All stuff you should relatively be familiar with. Now the catch here is you can increase a couple of these. They will be of course affected by the choices you already made. As you can see, the game kind of highlights exactly where it comes from. So this Sanctioned Psyker character has extra bonuses to perception as well as willpower just because of the choices I already made in character creation. Now I can put up to 2 bonuses onto my character's characteristics right now, and those are plus 5 bonuses each. So you have 6 of these to spend, and each one of them is worth 5 points, but you can only put 2 into each characteristic. So for this Sanctioned Psyker here, I would probably want extra willpower. Because I'm using the warrior archetype and not the mystic with this guy, I probably also want to pick up weapon skill, and then for me personally, I would probably dump it into something like toughness and then maybe a little strength. But that's kind of just the gist of how that works. And then next up we have our appearance tab. Now one of the really cool things about Dark Heresy compared to Rogue Trader is how much it steps up the visual fidelity of the models. They look way better. It is very noticeable. However, while I expect more appearance options to be added more generally, we already get a pretty good look at what's here on offer. You can, of course, pick between male or female, and then there's a variety of different faces and stuff. One of the really cool things I wanted to call attention to specifically was the body type one. Typically, there were only like a couple of those. In Dark Heresy here, you have 9 options. You can make your guy very average build, kind of on the smaller side, extraordinarily tall, overweight, extraordinarily skinny, and a few options in between. So I kind of dig that as an option. And then from there, it's the usual stuff. You've got hair options, eyebrows, beards, tattoos, appropriate augmentations. You can click the little plus sign to add extra variations and try to like layer that stuff if you want to as well, by the way. So while I definitely don't think this is the final version of the appearance stuff that we are going to see already, just, you know, a pretty cool update. And I think just the visual jump even coming from Rogue Trader is something cool to note. But that, I think, is pretty much going to do it for an in-depth look at character creation for the beta in Dark Heresy. I do think we will obviously have other stuff to talk about when the release rolls around, but for today, that is pretty much going to do it. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.